Going to be good on the stream. Everything good here?
We are good to go.
Call the Westfield, Washington Township Advisory Plan Commission to order for June 3rd, 2020. Will the staff please note the presence of a quorum by calling the roll?
Ms. Bergman?
Here.
Mr. Graham?
Present.
Mr. Horke?
Here.
Mr. Johns?
Present.
Dr. Kelleher?
Here.
Mr. Maui?
Here.
Mr. McCarty?
Here.
Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Here. Have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Next up is the approval of minutes from May 18th, 2020. Having had opportunity to review those minutes, are there any additions, corrections, or comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. Please state your name before making any motions or seconds this evening, please.
Parkay moves to accept the minutes into the record as written.
Kelleher seconds. Oh.
I have a motion made by Mr. Horke, seconded by Dr. Kelleher, to accept the minutes, approve the minutes of May 18th, 2020 as written. Will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Bergman?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. LePerick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I would ask now that you please review the rules of procedures for this evening. We have one item up for consideration and 2 public hearings.
Yes, due to the COVID-19 emergency as declared by the Governor of Indiana, the format and conduct of this meeting has been modified to comply with executive orders regarding the conduct of public meetings, public hearings, and public gatherings. Relevant portions of the Indiana Open Door Law have been amended or suspended during the pendency of this emergency. For all petitions, tonight's meeting will have the following structure. The department will summarize the petition and describe what action, if any, is needed to be taken by the Plan Commission. The petitioner will then be given up to 15 minutes to present, and the president of the commission will call on each member to provide comments, questions, concerns regarding the petition. The petitioner will then have a chance to respond to comments. If any member of the public has comments regarding a petition scheduled for a public hearing this evening, they should be emailed to planners@westfield.in.gov with the petition name or number included in the subject line. Those comments will be forwarded to Plan Commission members and the petitioner. A few comments tonight for Plan Commission members and petitioners. Please have your email accessible during the meeting so you can read new comments as they're available. Also, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. There are no consent agenda items this evening, so we'll move on to the first item of business. 2005-PUD-04, Junction PUD Amendment 4.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the Commission. Pam Howard with the Community Development Department. Before you this evening for recommendation, I have an amendment to the Junction Planned Unit Development District. This 3-acre site is located at 17655 Shamrock Boulevard and was zoned the Junction PUD back in 2014. The proposed amendment would add multifamily dwellings as a permitted use, as well as increase the minimum and maximum building heights. The petitioner has been in contact with the Grand Junction Task Group, and a letter of support was included as an exhibit to the agenda. This item did receive a public hearing at the May 6th meeting, and no changes have been made to the proposal since that meeting. Comments during the meeting were consolidated into an issue list, which the petitioner has provided a response to and is included as Exhibit 9 on the agenda. Additionally, the department has provided responses to city-related questions in the staff report. The petitioner is requesting a recommendation this evening. I do have Bert Dalton, the petitioner, and his representative Jim Ake, who would like to make a presentation, after which both they and I will be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard.
So, this is Birch. Can you hear me? My Skype fell apart.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, is it time for me to speak, Mr. Graham?
Yes, Birch, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, APC members, for allowing me to have a short follow-up presentation. As Ms. Howard mentioned, I would respectfully request a vote on our amendment tonight, as there will be no changes to it. I think if you saw my follow-up on the 6 issues in the exhibit attached, we answered everything pretty completely. So I'm going to touch on a few things just to highlight it and then circle back on what I see as a one common discussion point. This project, if you look at the comp plan that was in place, specifically calls out that the majority of this property is in the specified district that suggests first floor retail and multiple stories in excess of 3 stories. So that's one of the exhibits I provided. We've had 12 people from the downtown task force, which supports the amendment. And if you take the current PUD and look at, and understand it and compare it to the minor amendments I'm doing, it downsizes the project significantly in mass and on use. So those are probably the most significant highlights, along with, if you look at the spreadsheet, it shows, the lowering of amount of cars in the area, which leads me to my last comment about the traffic. And I think most of us have dropped off kids at the intermediate school, the middle school, and the high school, and we all know the traffic problem is really only 15 to 20 minutes twice a day during school days. Other than that, Shamrock is pretty traffic free. So that problem or issue of traffic has existed back in 2014 when my current PUD was approved and didn't call for any, major change to it. And quite frankly, when I started coaching football on that specific field in 2006, that was the same traffic pattern. So if you look at what we're proposing and the fact that, we're going to add a turn lane in traffic to the front side of the retail or the multi-unit property, would siphon off well before the school. Riverview has expressed issues, during that time period. But if you think about it, teachers arrive ahead of that because their contract gets them in there before that. And all you're seeing there is actually adults dropping off their kids for a 15, 20-minute period. So I think this project does not impact traffic anymore, and that actually improves it. And on the southbound side of it, if you look at the roundabout, it has been a problem for it is that it didn't have a southbound leg that went anywhere. Well, with the Westfield Boulevard, you're going to have a new southbound traffic pattern that will help alleviate the north-south traffic a little bit. But, this project has nothing to do with adding traffic on 32 going west and eastbound. And so, I've been proactive in acknowledging the traffic before it was discussed, and I think this project is very deserving. It fits the comp plan, and, developers are guided by what, city leaders tell us to do or suggest that we do. And I brought a project in that fits the comp plan. So in simple conclusion, I would respectfully request a positive recommendation for this amendment tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. I will give opportunity for each of the commissioners to have questions or comments. We will start with Ms. Paul Jarrett this evening. Do you have any questions or comments on this project?
I do. Can you guys hear me okay? I hope you can.
Yep.
I'm hearing a
Go
lot
ahead.
of background, so I don't know
Yep.
what's coming.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. My initial concerns obviously are still the same, given the fact that we haven't seen any changes. Seeing the comments that there are concerns from several agencies about this, especially when you think about trying to turn left out of this development, and you're basically not wanting anyone to really go right. That's primarily school campus and not a main thoroughfare heading through up to Hoover. So all traffic then coming out of the development would be turning left. And that alone in of itself concerns me. And again, I've mentioned my other concerns in the prior meeting, and I still have those reservations, especially concerning the 4-story. And this is not what I was envisioning when we originally approved it. So for me, it still is a change, and one that I'm not really comfortable with right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Schmitz, do you have any questions or comments? Mr. Schmitz, questions or comments?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, let's see if I'm getting an echo. Oh, God. Crazy. I wanted to see if Cindy could elaborate on she mentioned that she had seen some concerns from agencies, and I wanted to hear what that was about. So Cindy, if you can hear me, if that's something that was in front of us or circulated elsewhere?
It seems to be that it was part of the staff report. At least that's the feeling I got. I did not see the full TAC report. It wasn't attached that I'm aware of.
Okay.
So maybe staff could better address that.
Yes, there's a section in the staff report, response to public hearing issues. It starts near the end of page 2, I guess about halfway down on page 2, which discusses our conversations with the police department, public works, and school administration, as well as the number of existing and approved multifamily units within the city.
Okay, I'll read through that. I didn't pick up on that as I read through that. I guess I don't know.
And we do have a representative of Public Works here if you would like to hear their take a little more on the traffic concerns.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Hi, this is John Nail, city engineer. I guess what's the specific question regarding traffic, and I'd be happy to address those questions individually.
Well, I guess the concern would be, and anyone else can chime in as well, but the site has some unique challenges, and one that Cindy pointed out is most exiting from the site is going to be a left turn onto Shamrocks, and now I saw the petitioner had provided a layout of potential 5-lane setup for Shamrocks. It's not there now, but are you troubled at all from a public works standpoint regarding the exiting of from this facility on the Shamrock?
There's no doubt that there's congestion during pickup and drop-off times throughout the week for this when the school's in session. I think that what's being presented here will help that to some extent. I think the bottleneck is probably further north of this site. As far as exiting, left turn exits, I do think that there may be some challenges during pickup and drop-off. But in non-peak hours, I don't see that being a major issue as far as left exits. Like I said, I do think there is a congestion issue, and it's something we're continuing to monitor in the engineering department. But if you're asking whether a fourth floor versus a third floor is a deal breaker, I don't think that extra traffic is really the issue with congestion in this particular stretch of road. And I think with respect to left exiting vehicles, the biggest concern may be what's on the first floor with this development, with the commercial side of things. You can imagine a coffee shop is going to correspond with drop off for school. That could be an issue, certainly, but I don't think that's the question here tonight with respect to the PUD amendment. Does that answer the question?
I think for me, it helps. Yeah, thank you. And beyond that, I don't think I had any further questions or comments, Randy.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McCarty, questions or comments?
Looking through my notes that I jotted down at the last meeting about this project, there's nothing particular that comes to mind, especially since the project isn't being edited or whatever the sort of any way. I particularly remember last time safety coming up as an issue, and I think, and I think someone else mentioned this as well, that if somebody wants to pose a threat to the schools, they'll find some way to do it one way or another, or if they're wanting to go on the highest building top, they're going to go to the hospital and not to this complex here. I remember saying last time that I think this will be a great development for downtown, doing the base of just having a mixed-use development between the businesses, and particularly I remember mentioning that just hopefully allowing this space to be affordable enough for in the age range like myself that are teachers with Westfield, or otherwise just getting into the workforce, but particularly with teachers to which they could just be able to walk to work and walk to school and be readily available for anything of that cause. So no particular questions here, just those comments. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Maui, any questions or comments?
Yeah, brief comments. Thank you, Randy. So the concern about the building height, I'm not hearing a major uproar. I disagree with the comment that going from 40 to 53 feet doesn't really make much difference. It can in some cases. However, in the spirit of a pedestrian type access to this building, the way it's pushed out toward the street as much as reasonably possible, away from the single family residences, I'm not particularly concerned about that as much as I was last time. As far as the traffic, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Nail, because you've already answered. My question basically is, what is the impact of this amendment? And what I'm hearing is we all agree there's congestion. This amendment is going to have negligible, if any, impact, and you actually commented at one point you could improve it. And then thirdly, I definitely think that this project fits the spirit and the intent of the comp plan. This is the sort of I don't know if density is the right word, but the verticality that we're looking for this area, and I think it's a good project to move forward with. And that's all for me, Randy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johns, any questions or comments?
I do have a few comments. Like Cindy, I am not comfortable with the project. I do believe that 4 stories, 53 feet in height is different than 40 feet. And I don't think it's appropriate to be bordering single-family homes. I also have some concerns regarding the traffic issues, and I appreciate the fact that the staff spoke to the police, to the school administration, and to the Public Works Department. And again, I would quote the staff's response, which was, and I quote, "All 3 departments were concerned about the traffic from both a quantity and safety perspective," unquote. In addition, in my opinion, I think we already have enough multifamily units in the area. We've got 2,400 existing apartment units and another 1,200 that have either been approved or permanent at this point in time. So that's a 50% increase on the existing amount. So I question whether we need additional multifamily at this site. Personally, I'd like to see the assisted living and the independent senior living that was approved 6 years ago and was promised for the site. I think that would be a great benefit and need for the city. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Horke, questions or comments?
No questions. The project I view is generally favorable. I'm comfortable that by the time traffic would be generated, there will be a solution for it. 4 stories as opposed to 3 when there's effectively a 7-story building nearby, including the mechanical level. I don't see as being significantly out of character for the area. And I think the density for downtown is actually pretty beneficial to have more people within walking distance to bring more things for those people to walk to. So I find it to be something that I can support. And if it's in its final form, I'm okay with that. I don't really have any new questions because there isn't anything new to question. We've only had updated information, and I'm comfortable that the updated information is something that we can work with.
Thank you. Ms. Berkman, any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you. One thing that I had mentioned last time that I don't think has been addressed is I have still a concern about the traffic pulling right out, which would be moving north. That's where the buses load. There are kids that are out in those parking lots. And I'm concerned about putting anything in that's going to increase the traffic that could potentially go in that direction, because there is nothing to stop that from happening. Somebody's in a hurry to get somewhere and they want to cut through those parking lots. It concerns me for the safety of our children in the community. So that's one thing. And the second thing I have is just a question, because we're looking at this widened platform of Shamrock Boulevard. And my question is that something that is approved, has a timeline for that being done? We have approvals from Riverview if needed for the land they'll need to give for that. And the land, the owner of the parcel on the other corner would have to give. Is that in writing somewhere, and this is a done deal to do all this widening of this road?
This is John Nail.
Yeah, okay.
This is John Nail. I'd be happy to let the petitioner, Bruce Dalton, speak to that, and I'll fill in anything that might be missed.
Birch, would you care to respond?
Yeah, I'm trying to get unmuted here.
You made it.
Am I on or not? I can't tell.
Yes, you're
Yes.
on. Go ahead.
So, no, nothing's in writing. You know, Seth Warren, the CEO of Riverview, and I met, and he's encouraged about giving up his side of the line, and so am I. So, I mean, you know, this is just, you know, this is not a developer-only problem. You said it yourself. You know, the school needs to be involved and all that. And, you know, quite frankly, if I put in my right lane, you know, I take care of your northbound issue. So, and again, you know, I've been in this spot many times, you know, since 2005, and it's an issue that lasts between 10 and 20 minutes. And so, obviously, at the different times of the morning, the left turn issue is kind of mute because the retail won't be as busy that early, and people that live there will be trained to either leave before the traffic or after traffic. We have traffic congestion in a lot of places, and for those that understand it, they avoid it. So, but to answer your question, no. You know, I offered a couple ideas for Riverview and I to discuss, along with Dr. Miller, who, if you look at it, he has the cut right off the roundabout, and he's had no traffic issues, you know, coming in. So, but no, there's nothing in writing, and, you know, there's many parties that have to be discussed. So,
this is John Nail. I would just add to that any improvements to Shamrock Boulevard will be coordinated with the city engineering department, as well as with the school corporation and Riverview. You know, this is a schematic that is a possibility of one of the options, but the final option that we would land on is going to work for all parties involved. We'll choose the solution that works best for everybody. Perhaps a 5-lane is the correct typical section, but it's possible that a median and some widened lanes with left turn lanes here and there may be a better option. But we'll look at some of the traffic counts and come to that conclusion as we work through this project with the petitioner.
Okay, thanks to both of you for answering that. And I'm good. Thank you, Randy.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Kelleher, any questions or comments?
My only comments are that I liked the original design, and I guess I'm concerned about the traffic more to the north. Everybody is worried about the traffic to the south, but I'm not sure how we're going to handle that to the north through the parking lot of the school. And number two, I know that in the original proposal, there were concerns about the neighbors to the east. I believe there are 2 lots that abut this, and that the height, I think, of another 13 or so feet does make a difference to those people getting sunlight in their backyards and things like that. And I disagree with Mr. Horke. Yes, Riverview is a much bigger building, but it is set back very far from these homes. This new proposal, or this proposal that is before us, is 30 feet from the property line. So those are my only 2 comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kelleher. I do have a few comments. I don't want to say what's already been said, but my personal opinion on this. I'm very familiar with this area. I live very near here. My wife works at the hospital. I'm over there different times of the day, quite often. The traffic is pre-existing condition with pickup and drop off. That's the real problem. There's not that much of a problem any other time of the day. And I forget who said it, but those who understand those type of traffic conditions avoid them if they don't need to be in that area. I understand the markets change between the assisted living, the multifamily. I don't want to see anything, any buildings go up in Westfield that aren't going to be successful. And if the market says multifamily and that it will bring market rate. I just think that's good business. The 4-story issue seems like the commission's about on the fence on that, whether it's, I understand Mr. John said 4 stories is taller than 3 stories. I understand that. But I do agree with Mr. Orke coming off of the 6, arguably 7-story building. It's a transition, quite a transition down to 4 stories. I understand the proximity of the single family, but to finish that point, I really don't have a problem with the 4-story because of what you gain with the footprint down on the bottom. The widening of the road is a future venture that Mr. Nail says is going to be coordinated by the city with all parties involved. I don't see it as a direct part of this PUD. It's just a proposed that this is what it may look like. It's not up to the petitioner to necessarily decide what it's going to look like. So having said that, those are my final comments. And since I was the last one to speak, I would entertain a motion from the commissioners at this time.
Before you do that, we actually had one more comment for Mr. Maui. He had a question for Mr. Nail.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mr. Maui had asked about traffic counts at this location. I do have traffic counts that we took as part of the State Road 32 reconstruction project. I don't have those numbers directly in front of me. I can provide them certainly to whoever would be interested. But for reference, I believe the last I looked, State Road 32 east-west in this location is about 18,000 vehicles per day. And so I believe Mr. Maui had mentioned that the staff report said it was an increase of 63 trips per day. That's just to give you an idea. We're talking about 18,000 vehicles per day east-west on State Road 32.
This is Maui, and thank you, Mr. Nail. That helps a lot, I think, to me, give context as to the frame of reference of what, if you want to call it, what percent increase there would actually be. It's relatively insignificant in the grand scheme of the congestion that's already there. So I appreciate the comments on that. Thank you.
Happy to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Maui. Mr. Nail, is there anything else? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion from the commission.
Orke would propose that we forward a favorable recommendation to City Council.
Graham will second that motion. I have a motion made by Mr. Orke, seconded by Randall Graham, to send 2005-PUD-04, Junction PUD Amendment 4, to the City Council with a positive recommendation. Ms. Howard, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Berkman?
No.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
No.
Dr. Kelleher?
No.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Ms. Bulgaric?
No.
Motion carries 5-4.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. I'll remind everyone that the remainder of the items on the agenda this evening do require public hearings. We'll carry the same format, presentation, then we will hold the public hearing, and then I will call the roll for any questions or comments from the commissioners. Next up on the agenda is 2006-PUD-05, Urban Vines PUD Amendment 1.
Good evening, Commission. For the record, I'm John Dorsey with the Community Development Department. Before you tonight for a public hearing is the Urban Vines Plan Unit Development Amendment 1. This project is located at 303 East 161st Street, totals approximately 5 acres in size. This project proposes to remove the requirement for an outdoor restroom facility from the existing ordinance 19-10 and to modify the concept plan. This project has been properly noticed and advertised for public hearing this evening. Staff has received a public comment prior to tonight's meeting. These have been provided to you in the public comments exhibit, which was last updated at the end of the workday. The petitioner, Noah Herron, and his representative, Matt Pleasant, are with us this evening to give a presentation on the project. The petitioner and staff will be available for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Jonathan, members of the commission. Matt Pleasant of Pleasant Cities LLC, 5821 Julian Avenue, Indianapolis, Indiana, representing Noah Herron of Herron Holdings LLC, owner and operator of Urban Vines Winery and Urban Farmer in Westfield. Next slide, please. As indicated by staff, the next PUD is an amendment to the Urban Vines PUD to update the concept plan located at 303 East 161st Street. Urban Vines Winery has become a prominent and leading establishment in Westfield. I'm sure all of you have been able to consume some beverages since it's opened. Next slide, please. The original Urban Vines PUD was adopted before the Westfield City Council in July of 2019. This amendment proposal is not adding additional land, rather updating the original PUD concept plan to include a covered porch that is already in place and removing outdoor bathrooms required under the original PUD. As you can see here, again, we're not expanding anything. Urban Vines, the site is staying along with the same zoning as it has been prior and will be today. Next slide, please. With the experienced growth, owner Noah Herron intends to move the processing operations currently located in the facility today to the Hoosier Hills proposal, which you will be hearing shortly after this presentation or this public hearing. By moving the processing facilities to that Hoosier Hills location, Urban Vines would experience less truck traffic along 161st Street and allow some minor interior remodeling. In the original Urban Vines PUD, there's a requirement to have an outdoor restroom facility due to the popularity of the tasting room, the outdoor venue. Those will be moved indoors with the renovations and remodeling. By moving the processing, allow more space inside to the expansion of the bathroom space. We are required to update the concept plan as shown here. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. The only substantial change, and by saying this again, the only substantial change from the old PUD into the new PUD is literally just the removal of the restrooms. I cannot stress that enough. It is very short, sweet, simple. The landscape planners are still required, the landscaping that are still there. The only thing that we are moving or changing, and next slide, please, Kevin, actually shows the final, what is in today the PUD. I literally took that page and threw it in just for this presentation, but it will remove the restrooms that were required and also put in parens underneath the patio is covered, just to be completely 100% clear that it is a covered patio. There's no questions when Mr. Herron decides to come forward with the detailed development plan amendment to make sure that he can get some of the permitting involved for the covered porch, the patio. But again, in the original PUD, it is held within substantial compliance with the concept plan, the structures, and that is exactly what we're doing here today. Is the reason why we have to come forward to present this is updating concept plan and removal of the restrooms. With that, we held a neighborhood meeting last Thursday on May 26th. A summary of that meeting is provided to staff and posted on this agenda for your review. I just want to reiterate that although the only comment from that neighborhood meeting pertaining to Urban Vines was asking to expand their vineyard and orchard, that is not in the proposal today. I know that does, but you know, that's it. That was the only comment that was pertaining to this, at least for that meeting. I am understanding that there is a public comment that was issued in. I'm happy to address that after the public hearing, if you wish. Otherwise, both Noah and I are open for your feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pleasant. This item does require a public hearing this evening. I will open the public hearing at 7:40 p.m.
Have received no additional comments at this time.
Anything, Ms. Howard?
Still nothing.
All right, I will close the public hearing at 7:42 p.m. Mr. Pleasant, you offered to respond to the submitted public comment. If you would care to do that, sir.
Sure. I'm assuming that everybody has had a minute to review that comment. Really, and I've kind of did in my presentation that, you know, the reason why we're in front of you today is to replace the concept plan. It still would be supersede replaced. The same verbiage from the original PUD would still apply. So that is the main reason why we have to come in front of you today. Also to remove that one statement for the restrooms, so that Mr. Heron is able to expand his restrooms inside and not have to build an addition onto the already the structure that's already there. The use of this is not changing. The land itself is not changing. You know, that's honestly that's really it. If anything, the amount of truck traffic and shipping will reduce itself. Again, I know I'm going to talk a little bit ahead of myself because I have the Hoosier Hills coming up soon, but if that were to be approved and the processing facilities were to move, all the truck traffic would be reduced, thus limiting or reducing the amount of traffic on 161st Street, which you know is right now a 2-lane highway at the moment. So that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. I went last. I'll go first this time. So you had stated you want the outside restrooms removed, and you had stated then, I'm sure it's in there somewhere, don't remember exactly reading it, but that there will be additional restrooms built inside the building?
That is correct. When the processing facility today, which is, if I'm looking at it right now, it's in the main building. If I remember, it's on the southeast corner. The kind of almost about a third of that structure is the processing for Mr. Heron, the process the wines and packaging. That will be, again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but going to Hoosier Hills proposal, that opens up some ample space for some remodeling renovations. The bathroom facilities that would originally be required to be outside would then be moved to inside for that expansion.
All right, so I understand the freeing of the space, but I guess more direct my question, is the amenity the same? Are you going to put the same amount of restrooms inside as what you were going to have to build outside? Is it 1 for 1? Are you downsizing that? Are you increasing that? I'm kind of curious to that, is because that's been a problem, ongoing problem. Just want to make sure that we're not getting around a problem here, that is being addressed in the remodel projects. That's my comment on that.
Understood. I'd be more than happy to do a little bit of research, make sure we get their correct calculations, and let you know.
That would be very helpful prior to coming back. And then one other thing, and I'll pass it on. You referred to the structure as a covered patio and a porch. My question is, did that structure exist the last time that that this came up for an amendment, or is this something that's been constructed between then and now?
Yeah, the patio was always contemplated, and then some of those in the winter time you can cover them. I think Mr. Heron was unaware that once you cover it, it actually makes your building itself, you're adding square footage. So it was an honest mistake for that regard. However, the patio that's been covered today is fairly successful, and I think Mr. Heron just wants the option to also, one, keep it, but also so you can follow the proper permits that are required. And this is a way, and this is I spoke with staff about this. Originally, we didn't file this way to have it covered on the plan. However, I was speaking with staff. We wanted to make 110% sure that when Mr. Heron does file for his detailed development plan, to have it amended, updated, so that he can get that final permitting involved, that there's absolutely no question, and we do not have to come back an additional, another time just for a covered patio.
Hey, this is Noah here. But to answer your question, yes, it was already exactly how it was last year.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to. Okay, I will pass it on to Dr. Kelleher. Questions and comments?
Yes, Randy, thank you. Moving the bathroom inside is not a problem. However, in the PUD, it doesn't say you're going to do that. So I would need some assurance that the bathroom was actually going to be moved inside. A second question is, if you're going to be doing remodeling because you are moving the processing facility elsewhere, that means the inside is going to be potentially larger for customers, requiring more parking, potentially, and other changes. So that's something that I think staff needs to look into. But my biggest concern here is this is an enforcement issue. Back in 2016, the BZA approved a project, and Kevin, do you have the BZA approval from that? You there? Okay, can you scroll down to pages 7 and 8? I think it is, and I don't know if anybody can see this, but the BZA approved this with the conditions, certain conditions, that landscaping be put in according to the landscaping plan, which is, what page was that, Kevin? There, well, that was the original one. There was landscaping, as you can see, whoops, back up, the one with the vines. Okay, this was the original plan that the BZA approved, with the conditions that the landscaping be put in, and there is landscaping along 161st Street, as you see. 161st Street is on the north side, on the top of this paper. Then there was going to be landscaping and vines, then the building, and then more vines. And some of the other variances on this project were not to have to put in street trees and other things, because in the front they were going to have vines. So the vines went all to the back, and we never got the landscaping along 161st Street. If you can go to what we approved at the Plan Commission a year ago, and page 15 of that. So we said, we went through the sound barriers and all that kind of stuff, but we said that we would approve this, and here's the landscaping. As you can see, to the right of this page, there were trees and bushes along the fence to face 161st Street. That was one of the conditions. The other condition was that the bathroom be put in by September of 2020. So I have a problem approving anything on this project until it at least comes into compliance with what we approved a year ago. It's been a year and there's still no landscaping out there. You have until September before you would have to put in the bathroom. So I think you have time to get the landscaping in and then come back to us and discuss the bathroom. And if that happens, then I think there needs to be something in the PUD that says there will be another bathroom inside. My other question is, if you're going to move the processing part of this to another building, then remodeling on the inside would require another building permit and some second looks, because if you're going to increase space for patrons, we already have a traffic problem, and staff would need to analyze whether your parking was adequate or how that needed to be addressed. So I'm not ready to vote on this tonight. I would not vote favorably because I think there are still compliance issues and enforcement issues that need to be addressed before it moves forward. Thank you.
Jenny, I can answer a couple of your questions there.
Sure.
The first question is about the landscaping. That's if you want to make a site visit, we worked with Sundown Gardens, and what you see on the Exhibit F is 100% done already. All the bushes, all the trees, all of that has been completed. So
okay.
I know
along the road, I didn't see those.
Yep. Yeah. If you pull into the parking lot, there's 7 trees, and all those bushes are in. I know Miss Linda Nas made a comment tonight at like 4:30 p.m. About that not being complete, but that has been 100% completed. As far as adding space for patrons, we are not adding any extra space to the public. We will still use the processing area for processing at Urban Vines on 161st Street. We will be turning 1 or 2 of the offices that are on the public side already into bathrooms. So that's where the bathrooms will come from. There won't be any renovation in the current processing or any open space to patrons.
Okay, so there will need to be building permits for the installation of the bathrooms and all that.
Yeah, we'll have to go through those.
And I drove by there the other day, and I swear there were no bushes there, but I may be going blind, so I will go by again.
Yeah, they were planted by Sundown Gardens in the fall of last year, and it is exactly how this landscaping plan looks.
Okay, well, my apologies for that then.
All right, Dr. Kelleher, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Berkman, questions or comments?
No, thank you, Randy.
Thank you. Mr. Horke, questions or comments?
Comment that I somewhat share Dr. Kelleher's concern. I don't drive 161st Street too often, and like her, maybe I'm going blind. I honestly don't recall that I've seen them, but I probably haven't been down there recently enough to have a good recollection. But a lot of what Noah just said maybe somewhat satisfies my concerns, but it just feels like we're doing this out of order. We're talking about what's going to happen in a facility when something else that's going to be subject of another approval eventually comes to pass. So all of this is going to have a time frame on it that's going to be well off into the future because we need to approve the other request and he needs to get it all done, and then he comes back here. So I'm feeling somewhat like we're trying to work on a moving target, which is unfortunately somewhat like it has felt in the past, that there were things that were anticipated and presented and approved that didn't end up happening, and the reasons are varied. I'm generally favorable to the things that are proposed, but I am somewhat bothered by making certain that we don't get caught in a situation where there's approvals that are out there that just aren't happening in the timeframes that were anticipated, and that it becomes some other enforcement or lack of enforcement issue, and that it gets overlooked because of other things that are more current and pressing on community developments or whoever's radar screens. I'm just feeling like this is coming to us earlier than perhaps it should, that we need to get the Hoosier Hills taken care of and agree that everything's fine there. And then maybe it's time after that for Noah to come back and revisit how he's going to finalize and complete the work at Urban Vines on 161st.
Thank you, Mr. Jorge. I think that when you see the proposal for the Hoosier Hills, it's not, we're doing this at the same time. We are not looking for a vote tonight. I just want to make that clear. We're anticipating to go through the normal process along with Hoosier Hills is the same way. So we felt that it was very important to show these at the exact same time. To make sure that you guys, we're not hiding anything. We're literally saying, hey, we're doing this because of anticipation of this. We're doing this because of this. So again, and you'll see, and I hope that the next presentation kind of satisfies you to a point. But yeah, that was at least our rationale for this.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johns, questions or comments?
I guess my number one comment would be, I agree with Mr. Jorge. In my opinion, we are putting the cart before the horse on this one. And I think we should probably focus on that Hoosier Hills ordinance prior to considering this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maui, questions or comments?
Yes, thank you. So I thought I was missing something. I was trying to reconcile what I've heard and what I read versus what I see in the concept plan, the revised updated concept plan. In terms of the landscaping, I understand that the change is really focused on moving the restroom indoors, but the fact that the concept plan then is void of all the landscaping that is still required, it just doesn't show up on the plan anymore. I don't think that should disappear off that concept plan. That could be an important future reference. As far as moving the restrooms indoors, certainly I'm in favor of that. But like the comments before, and if I can expand upon those, the verbiage needs to state something like no outdoor restrooms, or all sanitary facilities will be inside the building, so that we can actually see, because even though the cart and the horse may need to get switched around with another PUD, ultimately they each stand alone in terms of enforcement. So we need whatever verbiage has to take place in this amendment to satisfy us that those restrooms are indeed going to be put indoors. And then my last comment, I'm not exactly sure how this plays into a PUD and planning, but take, for example, the covered patio. I truly do believe that it was an honest mistake, but the development of this property, with all due respect to the incredible efforts and laudable DIY spirit of Mr. Herron, has been kind of a series of honest mistakes as he adapts to the popularity. And it all needs to be looked at by professionals who do this. I don't know any personally who would specialize in this building type, but for things like egress and whether you need fire protection when you have structures that are attached to the main building and things like that, I'm never comfortable when we start amending this particular PUD that all of those items are getting covered. It seems like we're always trying to catch up and figure out what is compliance. So in addition to the discussion about the restroom fixture counts and things like that, I encourage you, Mr. Herron, to make sure that you have somebody look at this kind of holistically, that we get everything right this time and get it all rolled in. And that was my last comment. Thank you.
Yeah, I can address that a little bit. I've worked with the fire department on everything we've done, and especially the patio and doing measurements and public capacity inside the facility. So we are fine on that end of it. This was an honest mistake. It started as a pergola patio, And then, I mean, I thought it was just be a nice, quiet little area for people to kind of get some shade. And then it started raining, so I was like, oh, let's put a roof on top of it. And then I was like, oh, it gets cold outside and we're busy inside. Let's put some siding on the side of it. So it really was, I mean, it just kind of turned into a 3 seasons or 4 seasons type room. And I was really unaware that it was, I mean, it just slowly became kind of a building on the outside. And it was just, I mean, it really was an honest mistake. As far as other honest mistakes, I really don't know what else. I mean, yeah, there definitely has been, like with sound and other things. I mean, so, but yeah, we're trying our best to, I mean, go through these processes and make sure that we're doing it the correct way. So.
I will have to say, Mr. Maui, you brought up the landscaping, that it's been removed off concept plan, but from a ministerial standpoint, the landscape plans that are in the original PUD are still applying, even though they're not shown on this concept plan. And I will be more than happy to talk with staff to make sure that that is correct, that if we put that landscape on this plan, that it's not going to adhere to any issues from the original. Again, I tried to make this PUD as short and sweet and simple that any layman can read and understand immediately. So that yeah.
And this is Maui again. I would agree with deferring to staff's ultimate decision and recommendation on that. I've always just looked at the notion of when you're making a change and a new drawing is going to supersede the old drawing, the only thing that should change is the thing that was discussed, approved, and so forth. But if they can still administer that out of the text and are okay with the plan actually changing, it doesn't feel right to me. But as long as that still is a good enforceable method for doing it, then I'm fine with that. Whatever staff would recommend. Thank you.
And this is Noah. That's my fault. I couldn't find the old exhibit, and this is the one that popped up, and I didn't add the landscaping to it, so I should have, and we can do that.
This is Jenny, and I just want to tell Andre I agree with him. The problem is that 5 years from now, when somebody pulls this up, they won't remember that it referred to something else. So I agree. I think those things need to carry forward.
Thank you. I would remind Mr. Pleasant and Mr. Heron that each time you speak, please state your name. I know the difference in your voice, but this is a recording. It's going to have to be deposed, and it will be very helpful for the public record. Moving on to Mr. McCarty. Any questions or comments?
Oh, geez. Nothing too extreme. I would just say that, for one, I agree with Mr. Maui's comments about, it would have been great from the beginning to, and I know this was long before me, but on a project like this, and as popular as this location has become, just to have the whole building concepts at once instead of adding here, adding there, and so forth. I totally understand, as a business gets popular, you have to expand and so forth, but I digress on that. But then I will also agree with Mr. Graham's comments about just wanting to make sure that in moving the bathrooms from the outside to the inside, to make sure we have the proper/equal amount, so that way we're not sacrificing anything, again, especially because of how popular this location has become. I also agree with, just needing to see how Hoosier Hills comes about, and that's another topic unto itself. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Schmitz, questions or comments?
Really, my main concern was just getting some certainty that the new restrooms would be that there would be new restrooms being constructed inside in lieu of outside. So those concerns have been addressed. So I'm taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmitz. Ms. Spalgeric, questions or comments?
Hi, thanks, Randy. you know, I agree with basically everything that's been said already. In very plain terms, right now, the way the ordinance reads to me is that it simply would not require the permanent outdoor restrooms. And so obviously that's a problem because it just takes that away and it supposes that you put them in there with requirements. So the way it reads is not acceptable to me. Again, I agree with the previous comment. Thanks.
Thank you. And I agree with Ms. Paul-Jarrick, and I think that when it is written in there about the restrooms being built inside rather than outside, that my opinion is that the timeline needs to be included in there. And my opinion is that the timeline is still September of this year because that was what we agreed upon a year ago. So any other final comments beyond mine? Okay, thank you. We will move on to the final item of business this evening. 2006-PUD-06 Hoosier Hills Pd.
Good evening again, APC. For the record, this is John Dorsey with the Community Development Department. Before you tonight for another public hearing is the Hoosier Hills Plan Unit Development. This project is generally located at 18325 Spring Mill Road. Total is approximate 35 acres in size. This ordinance proposes to modify the current AGSF1 agricultural single-family rural district to allow for an agritourism, commercial, and agricultural uses. More specifically, the proposed uses include cabin lodgings, the shipping and processing of agricultural products, and general agritourism. Again, this petition is before you for a public hearing, which has been properly noticed and advertised. As last checked at 5 p.m. today, staff has received public comments prior to tonight's meeting. They've been supplied to you in the public comments exhibit on the agenda. Here this evening again is Noah Herring and is Representative Matt Pleasant to give a brief presentation. Staff will be available for questions afterwards, as is the petitioner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Jonathan. Members of the commission, this is Matt Pleasant of Pleasant Cities LLC, again at 5821 Julian Avenue, Indianapolis, Indiana, representing Noah Herron of Herron Holdings LLC, owner and operator of Urban Vines Winery and Urban Farmer in Westfield. Next slide, please. The Hoosier Hills Pd is an exciting project located generally at 18326 Spring Mill Road, just south of 186th Street, south of Sundown Gardens and the Westfield Grand Park Sports Campus. Next slide, please. This location is currently a horse farm. The property is roughly 35 acres surrounded by Sundown Gardens to the north and then agricultural residential uses the rest of the way around. Next slide, please. The site is currently zoned to AGSF1 agriculture residential. The properties surrounding the proposal site east southwest are also AGSF1 and the Garden Market PUD, which is Sundown Gardens to the north. Next slide, please. As indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan does designate the property to be new suburban, although that was prior to the establishment of the Grand Park Sports Addendum. The Grand Park Sports Addendum contemplates the sports corporate campus immediately across the street to the east. In short, that really means regional commercial, some industrial uses can be permitted. Next slide, please. In this context map, the existing residential single-family detached homes further to the west is expected to be expansion of that neighborhood or something more dense, such as duplexes or maybe even townhomes in certain locations. This slide shows the context of which Hoosier Hills will be a part of. I'm going to kind of go through some transitional uses. So moving from east to west with the Wheeler PUD establishes, right where he's showing industrial office campus. And then as you move west, there's a large parcel there, which is agricultural today. It's safe to say that that is based on the Graham Park Sports Campus addendum that it will be contemplated for a little bit more commercial industrial space all the way up to Spring Mill Road. You have Sundown Gardens and Hoosier Hills on the west side of Spring Mill. Sundown Gardens, as you know, is I would consider that commercial outdoor space. It has an agricultural feel to it, but it's also very much of a commercial space. And then residential, as you move westward, Spring Mill Road has been designated as a primary arterial, expecting some pretty intense traffic flow. It is a major artery that lead up to Graham Park. Along that street, there are contemplated and zoned to this day both commercial, residential, and uses. That's it right there. Next slide, please. If you're a part of the city council introduction at the beginning of May, or you have gone back and watched it, you will notice some changes based on the feedback we did receive from council. The Hoosier Hills development is contemplated now having 2 agritourism districts. The PUD has an underlying zoning district of AGSF 1. With the experience growth that NOAA has experienced at Urban Vines and Urban Farmer, who wishes to move those facilities or that operations to these buildings that you see on the screen. By moving the processing facilities of Urban Vines and all operations of Urban Farmer to Hoosier Hills, Urban Vines would experience less traffic along 61st Street. 61st Street would also experience less traffic just for the mere fact that Urban Farmer would not be in operation there any longer. So contemplated within the Agritourism District 1 are agritourism uses such as farm stands, community activities, fundraising events, cabin facilities, vineyard, orchards, educational tours, listed into the PUD itself. Very explicitly, I might have mentioned, the cabin facilities, which I'll go through in a few minutes, are also allowed in the Agritourism District 1. Agritourism District 2 on the north side of the property, about 10.2 acres, contemplates everything mentioned just prior. The cabins lodging would not be permitted in that district. Next slide, please. So these are the existing buildings on the site today. Urban Vines and Urban Farmer processing and holding operations are intended to go inside these buildings, both from an office standpoint as well as processing and holding standpoint. They will be brought up to code that is required from the fire marshal and any building codes that are required, and so that they may function inside of these buildings. Next slide, please. This is an anticipated illustrative site plan. As you can see, the lodging is positioned in the west edge of the lot, compatible with anticipated homes contemplated to show up on the west. We believe this concept is representative and complementary to the surrounding and future land uses. Sundown Gardens to the north is a commercial use, and it would kind of make sense to where they would be going right there. There is contemplation that Sundown Gardens may expand slightly into the parcel to the north. In that case, this is a good buffer in between the two uses. If Sundown Gardens does not expand to the north, for that north parcel, the 10.2 acres, Mr. Heron fully intends that area to be farmed as additional vineyard and orchard space for the wine. Next slide, please. So NOAA really enjoys the farming barn architectural style that intends to carry over throughout the development that is there today. That is, the barn lodging is contemplated to provide another option beside hotels for sports teams, corporate events, families traveling to and from the area to stay together under one roof. Those are the big red ones on your screen right now. What I always gave to the council, I think still to this day it's a good concept to imagine. If you've been to Hilton Head Island or the Outer Banks, even parts of Florida, you're able to rent a house that can hold an extended family as they go there. That is kind of what they're contemplating here for something like this. It's right next to Grand Park. It's intended for some of the sports teams to be all lodging together. The cabins that are contemplated here are smaller, much smaller, to be fair, for individuals, small families, and even medium-sized families up to 5-6 people. They will include kitchens, restrooms, just as you would as a normal cabin, as if you're going to go camping, and I put camping in air quotes, you can't see me. But glamping, I think, is what they call it nowadays. But the cabins provide a rustic feature, complementing that rural agricultural theme that we believe completely fits into this development. Kevin, is there one more slide? Or is that it? All right. In summary, the Hoosier Hill provides a perfect transition solution from the intense industrial offices to the east, to the commercial to the north as well, moving to residential to the west. It is a quieter, and it will be quieter compared to having more commercial uses that could potentially show up, just being for the sheer fact that it is close to Grand Park, that it is along a major arterial, and then that there is contemplated that across the street would be more industrial office uses. We held a neighborhood meeting last night, or I'm sorry, on last Thursday on May 26th. At the same time, we did Urban Vines PUD amendment. That summary has been provided to you, and it is on the agenda today. Those discussions were positively received and provide some additional detail that Noah was free to give. I'd like to thank you for your time. Noah here and I are welcome to any feedback or questions that you may have.
Thank you. This item does require a public hearing this evening. I'll open the public hearing at 8:17 p.m.
I currently have no comments.
All right, we'll give it a minute. Still nothing, Ms. Howard?
Correct, still nothing.
I'll close public hearing at 8:19 p.m. And the first commissioner, Ms. Spalgeric, any questions or comments?
Yes, I do have a number of them. In a very broad sense, this seems like a potentially new and exciting opportunity to have something like this. But I have many concerns. So we do not have any kind of inspection process or permitting for Airbnbs. And what I see, at least part of this project being, is a community of what I would consider more like Airbnbs, all in one area, primarily targeted for Grant Park, given its location, with structures that are on top of each other in what I would consider a more dense residential neighborhood without any standards attached to them. It looks like because of its Ag SF1 underlying, it skirted a lot of the things that we would require in a regular subdivision, but also not having that permitting, potential right now, not understanding exactly what that operation would be, I guess. We don't have anything like that here, and because we don't, I feel like I have to fully understand exactly what it is I'm approving, and given the way this is written right now, I don't have that sense. The wording of the ordinance is one thing, but just the overall concept, it doesn't seem like it's fully fleshed out yet in terms of what this site is. I understand from Urban Vines and Urban Farmer kind of what he's looking to do, but it's with the rest of the site that I'm still very unclear. And there's a whole lot of potential problems when we don't put our arms around that. And just like what we've seen at Urban Vines, there's a lot of unintended consequences that you don't always think about in advance. And with a project like this, it's got the potential for numerous issues. So I'm going to have to think a lot harder on this one, and I'll have written comments this week into staff, or it might be early next week, I'm sorry, but they'll be forthcoming. Thank you.
This is Matt Pleasant. Thank you, Cindy. We look forward to those comments. John, I'm not trying to convince you right this second, but I would like to provide a little bit of clarity. That we worked with, I worked with staff quite a bit because I know the definition came up from them about like what is this? What do we do? How do we kind of define this? And we made sure, I was working with Jonathan on this pretty hard, and I came up with this the way it's written, and really we struggle because the definition of a hotel doesn't work, because I didn't want to give, really the definition of a hotel kind of does work in this instance. However, I did not want that, and I know Mr. Heron definitely does not want that to be a permitted use to say what a hotel is allowed to be here, because I don't think anybody wants that. So I kind of working with staff kind of finagled it around to where the hotel maybe definition thrown in with a little bit of verbiage to make sure that it stays what is contemplated here today. At least that was the rational thought from it. I know that speaking with staff, they were able to understand that piece of it. I'm happy to review some of these your comments when they come through. I know we call them Airbnb like. I know that we are looking at this as kind of a hotel for individual rooms. You just kind of separated from each other in a way for the cabins, and then you may have one larger building or two just to house a sports team or extended family. I'd like to think that the Airbnb portion of this, I know this has come up before, that's why I'm bringing this up. I know that Airbnb is a concern in a lot of neighborhoods, and the only thing I would offer is that this might be an alternative for that, so that people are still getting the somewhat of a home and a home feel, and not necessarily have to get locked up into a hotel room. They still have some of a house to rummage around through, even though it is a cabin. But yeah, I look forward to reviewing your comments.
Thank you. Mr. Schmitz, questions or comments?
I don't think I have any right now, and kind of for the same reason Cindy talked about. I just have, just need more information. I think a few more refinements that will hopefully occur through this process. So I think I'll defer any questions questions I have for this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmitz. Mr. McCarty, questions or comments?
So first, yeah, I'll definitely agree with Cindy's comments and Smith's as well of needing more information just in general. In regards to Airbnb regulations, I know many neighborhoods have a struggle with that of is it allowed, is it not allowed, you know, and even if it is not allowed, it's still happening in neighborhoods. And with the aspect of it mainly being used for sports teams, still I attribute to, you know, I've traveled the world and stayed in many different Airbnb variations, and I would definitely see this more so aligning as an Airbnb situation as opposed to a hotel situation. I mean, if not just on presentation on loan of how the buildings will be built and presented and so forth. Which, you know, I love the aesthetics of the buildings. I think that's great, especially for the area. Along the lines with the concern of, as we had just with the previous presentation with this coming up, just wanting to make sure everything that's put forth is thoroughly vetted and thought through, and we don't have a continued situation like Urban Vines where you know, there's something that pops up, or trying to predict the future of just building add-ons and so on and so forth. Just wanting to make sure we bunker down and get everything correct this time around. Mainly, my perspective is I grew up on this road, traveling it literally every day. I'm very familiar with the families there and the horse farm and just the whole history and heritage. So I just want the best for this area, if not just for to respect the area, but to respect the community and how this is going to develop going in the future. You know, don't want it to be a hodgepodge with, you know, this whole area as it's been developed throughout the year and the years, and it will continue to do so. So I'll cut myself off, but those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCarty. Mr. Maui, questions or comments?
Yes, thank you. So Ms. Spolgeri kicked off the conversation really well with expressing concerns about I believe the term was operation of the cabin lodging. I agree with that. I would expand that into even wondering how it will be managed. And as I listen and contemplate and my concerns over that area, which is such a unique sort of proposal, I do think, even though you're trying to avoid the connotation of a B&B or the definition of a hotel, I would look for it operationally to be more hotel. Even though maybe the concept and character defines that as separate individual structures and so forth, in terms of the way it operates and the way it's maintained and the way that it gets controlled and everything, I think it would need that level of attention to avoid some of the problems that could occur if this gets out of hand. Along with that, the concept plan seems to imply that there would be a separate drive for the lodging area. These are questions either for now by the petitioner's response or for the next round. Either way, it appears that there could be a separate drive, and I don't know if that's something to take literally or how that was actually intended to develop. I think in addition to ensuring that it is a separate drive, there needs to be a physical boundary, I believe, to separate the lodging area, which has the internal green space, from access to the rest of the zones. I got to remember which one's which. I'll just call them north and south, to prohibit those staying in the lodging from getting into the north zone or into the rest of the south zone where the other operations, offices, the detention pond, and so forth are. I think it really needs to be contained, really managed and controlled as a hotel would be, although there are separate structures, and that's my big concern about this. The rest of it is, as far as moving the processing operations and everything, I don't have so much concern with all that here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malley. Mr. Johns, questions or comments?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I'm trying not to repeat anything anyone else said. I definitely agree with Cindy. Mr. McCarty stole my thought when he said hodgepodge. I'm very concerned with the project as a whole because it has so many different businesses involved and moving parts. I mean, I'm glad that you dropped the one section was going to be a storage area, storage units. And I think it makes sense not having that in this facility. I think we probably have enough of those in Westfield to start with. But I think there's still too many businesses here. And I'm concerned with how these cabin units are going to affect our hotels that we've already approved and that are suffering through the COVID and trying to ramp back up. What would happen there? Granted that these probably won't be built for some time, but I'd like to at least hear more of a detailed business plan about who's going to be running these cabin units and how are they going to be run. Again, there's some wonderful ideas here, but there's so many different businesses mixed together into this one PUD that I don't know that we can ask you enough questions to really clarify it to the point where we could put our arms around it. So anyway, I will submit some questions in writing to staff over the next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Mr. Horke, questions, comments?
More comments than questions. I think it's an intriguing use, and I'm kind of liking it conceptually. I think getting the wine use off of 161st and over here is beneficial, but it's a very large site. That's only going to be a small part of it, and like others have indicated, calling it agritourism and some accommodations, it's hard to imagine what could possibly come with that because it's a lot of site to fill up. So it's going to need to be worked over quite a bit to come up with a lot more clarity and definitions. I would liken the cabins perhaps to be something more akin to state or national park-like settings that I've visited a few times over my life, where you do get your own little living space and it's effectively run in large part like a hotel, just with rooms that are individual buildings as opposed to something more traditional. And they look kind of attractive, but one of the things I think that makes them look kind of attractive is that some of the character exhibit pictures show them in more wooded settings. I think the setting that's represented on the concept plan is pretty sterile looking, so they're probably not going to have the kind of vibe that I would hope that they might, and attraction, but I would think they'll probably still become, if they're marketed correctly, known, and could be extremely popular. And it may be that they need even more green space around them if it's something that actually does get team use, that may want to have workouts and things while their team is over at their accommodations as opposed to in the park. But I'm thinking it's something that I'd like to see revised to address whatever concerns are coming out of tonight's public hearing and our comments, and come back for further review. And I'd like to hopefully see something that I can support that gives us something that's really kind of unique and will be a good attraction.
Thank you, Mr. Horke. Ms. Berkman, questions or comments?
Yes, thank you. First off, I just want to say thank you to Noah for bringing this to us. I think this is something that's really exciting for Westfield, and it goes with the identity of Westfield. And I think it's also potentially something that could really be marketable with Grand Park, which I know is something I've been talking about with a lot of you on what do we have near Grand Park that keeps the money in Westfield as far as attractions and things for these teams to do. So I'm not going to repeat the concerns because I share them on this has got to get a lot more detailed, and show us kind of what you are planning to do with this. But I think the potential here is very, very high, and I'm excited to see something like this brought forth. And I know it needs a lot of definition because it's new, and I'll summarize some things and send it to staff. But I wanted to just highlight and ask Noah or Matt, have either of you been to Lake Rudolph Campground in Santa Claus, Indiana?
This is Noah. I have not.
That would be a really, I know it's like a 3.5 hour drive, but it would be a great place for you to visit because it's right next to Holiday World, and our baseball team has stayed there 3 times. They have different types of cabins, like you're talking about, done very efficiently. They look very nice. They've done a very good job with, and I know I'm using the word campground and people might be freaking out, but, and there are tents there, but they have a lot of these cabins. They also have a lot of amenities and how they've laid that out. And I think that they would be a really good resource for you. And then also, you've probably been here, but Dull's Tree Farm, that's just a little bit north. They also are a kind of an agri-tourism, I would say, type of business with a Christmas tree farm and a fall festival. And so I think that that's another business that you might look at and call that family and see what's working for them. And maybe that'll help you kind of come together with what you'd like this to look like and be, because I could see it being a really great marketing arm to Grand Park. I could also see it being a wedding venue. And so, and maybe it can be both. But I think that kind of narrowing in on these sections, like some others have said, would be extremely helpful. So that's it for my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kelleher, any questions or comments?
Yes. Matt Pleasant, do you have the ordinance in front of you? You can take notes because I'm going to try to give you some more specifics.
I got it.
Okay. Well, first of all, I agree with everybody. I think that Noah has great ideas. I think then the execution is what we're having trouble with here. And if I go down here, I start off, first of all, with the definitions. You use 2 of our definitions, agricultural use and agritourism. And if staff could roll the ordinance up to that beginning of the ordinance. And those, you have taken our definitions and modified them. And I have a problem with that, not with you, but with anybody taking one of our definitions and modifying it. I would rather you said agritourism and then added those extra things you wanted, than rather than modifying our ordinance, because I'm sure a lot of people looked at these and thought, well, that's our ordinance, and it's not. For example, in the agricultural use, you've taken out a couple of words, but the biggest change is in the agritourism use, which is an agriculturally based operation that talked about bringing family-oriented things together. You've changed that to, instead of Christmas tree farm, it's tree sales. You've added garden, there's garden center. Instead of saying family-oriented, you've said community activities and added things like live music, fundraising, charitable events, corporate outings, weddings, things like that, which is fine for you to add for us to evaluate, but when they get thrown into our definition of agritourism, that is not our definition of agritourism. So you're really asking for more than agritourism, and I just want that sorted out so that it's clear to everybody when they're looking at this.
Dr. Keller, do you mind real quick? I have absolutely no problem with this is Matt Pleasant, by the way, sorry for the record. Sure. I have absolutely no problem doing exactly what you're requesting.
Sure.
Historically, staff has always liked it just to be kind of placed back on here just so it's all one place and they're not going back and forth and looking on 2 or 3 documents sometimes. So
right.
if staff doesn't care, I'm more than happy to do it. If it's staff's
right.
policy that they would like us to keep it this way, then again, I'm going to default to staff on that one if you don't mind.
No, I agree. And I think the problem is every time we've had definitions in other PUDs, they have been for a new use or a different use. But taking our definitions and then modifying them from within, I think is a bad thing to do. I would rather say agritourism and then, then say that you're modifying it to do this. I think that makes it clearer because you are actually changing the agritourism use to more of an event center by the way that this has been changed. And I just think we need to know that. Not that I'm for it or against it. I just think we need to know that this is not our definition of agritourism.
Understood.
Yeah. The second thing is under barn and cabin home, I have the same problems that everybody else does. I love those little cabins, but the way it's written, this could be a hotel. It could be 35 units with 30 people in them, which is 1,050 people. And I don't think that's what Noah is looking for. I think he and the community may be looking more for the cabins and a unique place to stay. That's not a hotel. We've got plenty of those. And I agree with Mr. Johns. I don't think we want to compete with the ones we have. And I think you want something unique. And Mr. Horke made a good statement that they look like a bunch of, hotel rooms all lined up. And I think what you're going for is something where there is green space and there is landscaping in that area to make it attractive. But again, that isn't in this PUD. And I think if that's what you're going for, it needs to be added somehow to make it unique. When we get to illustrative layout, you say, this is one possible layout. And I think you need to be a little more specific than that, because when staff goes to determining what needs to be paved and what doesn't and all kinds of things, I think we need something a little bit more specific than this is just one possible layout. Under character exhibit, you have 2 pages. The first page shows the existing buildings. Can we scroll to character exhibit, which is page 3 of the ordinance? Actually, it's further down. And the first picture is of the existing buildings. And I think your second picture is really what you're trying to convey that you want to do. I don't think you're going to build anything like those first buildings. I think what you're going to do is improve them to look like the barns in the second buildings. So I'm not sure whether you want to leave that first one in, because theoretically that could be what you're doing.
I can, this is Matt. I can clarify if you'd like me to.
Sure.
The way that the PUD is written, that those existing buildings are used as an example. If Mr. Herron were to ever build a new building on there, not as a cabin or a lodging facility, just like you're seeing on the screen today. And again, I know that under, let me see what page it is. Page 4, 8.1 under the the architectural standards over 8.1A.
Right.
And again, I know this was also brought by staff, and then we had a discussion about it, but I am like repeating myself again in the UDO about the compatibility surrounding rural and agricultural character. New building should use exterior building materials, roof line treatments, and roofing materials are compatible with and consistent with the existing buildings within the district. So what it is saying that, hey, if Mr. Herron needs to build an additional facility, it needs to look architecturally compatible with what is existing today, whether it be an office building or more of a holding cell or more processing facility. If he's looking to build a cabin or barn homes, those examples would be Exhibit E, which is what was shown previously.
Okay. And under landscaping standards, you're asking that a lot not apply and that the existing landscaping be counted as the road frontage landscaping. There's a small section where there are some trees in front of the barns, the horse barns, but then the north and the southern portion of the property are simply hay fields. So I don't know what kind of landscaping standards we want to do. Maybe it's not like we have in a subdivision, but if you're going to leave hay fields there, that might be appropriate. But I'd like to see a little more attention paid to what it's going to look like along the road. And I think those are my biggies. I think one of Cindy's points was well taken, and I think that is this is kind of doing a minor subdivision in many ways, but avoiding the requirements of that. And that's a concern that I have. because then we're, again, kind of at the dead end of the road and we're out into open space that we don't have any real plans for. So I agree with everybody else. I think there needs to be a lot more detail in this to get what I think NOAA is looking for. And I think a building with a B&B, I don't know how you write that down, but a building where you're going to put 30 people. If I'm here with my kids for a team event, I wouldn't mind a building with a couple of other families, but I don't think I'd want to be stuck in there with 30 people. I'd much rather have a cabin where I had my space to get to. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. I think Dr. Kelleher covered most everything I wanted to say after Ms. Bulgaric had kind of opened up. There's nothing I fundamentally disagree with. I pretty much agree with all of it. Certainly more detail. I mean, this is just a public hearing. This is what this is for. You know, no public comments came in during public hearing, but you've heard a ton from the commissioners. So work with staff. There'll be more stuff coming to you through staff as we work through the process. And you know, I personally also need to see a lot more detail. I'm also concerned about management of a facility like this. You know, we've seen even here in Westfield that management companies can make the difference between something nice and something not nice. So that and having all the wording in the PUD, because it's maybe something that Mr. Heron starts, and if he loses interest in this, it could be finished out by somebody else, and what's allowed is what's allowed that we approve. So I want to make sure that we get it right the first time on this project. And those are my comments. Are there any final comments from the commissioners? Any final comments from Mr. Pleasant or Mr. Heron this evening?
This is Matt Pleasant. I just want to thank you for listening today. And it's a little more difficult when we're all not together to have to kind of verbally express and go into detail in that regard. But I appreciate your patience and I appreciate your feedback. And Mr. Heron and I will get back together, put our heads together, and see what we can come up with. And I look forward to your additional comments this week.
Thank you. Does staff have anything further this evening? That was the last item of business.
No, this is Kevin. Yeah, no, nothing further from us at this time.
Right, no further business. Randall Graham will make a motion to adjourn.
Kelleher will second.
I have a motion made by Randall Graham, seconded by Dr. Kelleher to adjourn tonight's meeting. Will the staff please call the roll?
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Bulgaric? Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
I believe Ms. Bulgaric got dropped from the call, but I will try her one more time. Ms. Bulgaric? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.